Hello lovely, my name is Frankie and welcome to this video which is going to be covering the things that we have been doing to get our 8-week-old to sleep through the night. So our darling daughter Rhea, she is nearly 8 weeks old and she is sleeping from about 8 p.m. to about 5 a.m. every night. She is our second child and our first wasn't the best sleeper. We had very up and down sleep with Juno, who was our first, and we tried a load of different things. So we decided with our second that, you know, the things that kind of worked the best the first time round, we were going to try and implement them a little bit earlier this time and just see, you know, what happens. Because when you've got one baby, you can kind of function on no sleep. But when you've got two, you need to be as rested as possible. When you've got a toddler running around and you've got a newborn, both with completely different needs, you need to get as much rest as possible. So we decided we were just going to try and implement these things as early as possible. Apologies if you can hear work going on. Our neighbours are having a huge renovation and they are banging around outside. It's even louder upstairs, so we are going for it down here. I just want to add at this point as well that babies are not robots, and what Rhea might be doing now could be completely different in a few weeks. She might sleep through for the duration of her life. She might decide in a few weeks that she needs to feed every 2 or 3 hours. Everything is a phase with babies and it goes up and down. Having said that, we will still continue to stick to the things that I'm going to tell you, even when we have moments where she's not sleeping so great. We'll always do the things that we're doing now. So I will share those with you now. We'll get straight into the video. This first one sounds really simple, but it's actually pretty tricky, especially when they're your first, because you just don't want to do it. And that is put them down as much as possible awake. So that doesn't have to be put them down for sleep. That doesn't have to mean just put them down in their bouncer. It's kind of everything. Whenever you're putting them down, just try and have them awake as much as possible. So they're not kind of falling asleep on you and then you're putting them down or any situation like that. We've found that when we put the baby down as much as possible when she's awake, then she kind of is learning to self-settle and self-soothe, and is also just quite happy being awake and on her own rather than always being cradled or always being cuddled. Obviously, not linear, and we have so many cuddles with Rhea and so much comfort. We give her so much comfort, and she quite often does fall asleep on us because we are not robots either. But as much as possible where we can, we put her down awake. And also because she is our second, we just don't have the time to spend cuddling her, rocking her, and then transferring her when she's asleep. So we just have to put her down more when she's awake. And that is one thing that I've found has really worked with her, because it's enabling her to self-settle and self-soothe. The next tip is about feeding, whether you're bottle feeding or breastfeeding, it doesn't matter, however you feed. Just try and space out their feeds as much as possible. Someone gave me a bit of advice with my first it might have been in a book actually, I can't completely remember. But basically the advice was that however long they can go in the day without a feed, it can generally kind of double through the night. So for example, if your baby can go 2 to 4 hours without a feed in the day, then they can go 4 to 8 hours without a feed at night. Rhea's really good at that. She feeds really well, probably every 3 to 4 hours in the day. Whereas my first, she was much more of a micro feeder. She would kind of feed a little bit, stop, an hour later feed a little bit more, stop. Whereas Rhea's much more of like this is my meal, I'm going to feed now, I'm going to get everything I need, and then I won't need anything for a few hours. So I kind of know from that, because she feeds every 3 to 4 hours in the day, she should be able to go 6 to 8 hours without a feed at night. I don't know what the science is behind that. I am not a medical professional or a sleep expert, but that's what I've read in a book or advice that someone else has given me, so I'm giving that to you. I think with spacing out the feeds as well, it also, going back to what I've just said, make sure that they are feeding because they are hungry and not feeding for comfort. Those are two really different things, and we've seen it with Rhea. We had it a lot with Juno, our first. Babies a lot of the time just want the nipple for comfort, which is totally understandable because it's their source of food and it's what's keeping them alive, and it's close to you and it's warm and it's cozy and it's lovely. But that habit we found with our first was really hard to break. She constantly wanted the boob for comfort. She constantly fell asleep on the boob. And whilst it was absolutely gorgeous and I loved every minute of it, it was really hard to get her to sleep on her own or stay asleep for a long period of time, because she was always kind of waking up like, this isn't where I fell asleep, or I'm not on mummy anymore, I'm not having any more milk anymore. So it was just kind of, those habits were quite hard to break, we found, with our first. So we decided that we would try and not do that as much with our second. Obviously, it happens. She does fall asleep on me. She does fall asleep when she's having milk, but we just try, if we can, not to make it a habit. So this next one is about feeding as well. And it's something that we did with our first from a really young age. And it's something that we implemented with Rhea, our second baby, even earlier. And that is a bedtime bottle. She is breastfed in the day and she has breast milk in a bottle at night. And we did exactly the same with Juno when Juno was from about 8 to 12 weeks, I think, with Juno, we did it. With Rhea, she's been taking a bottle at night since she was 4 weeks old. One reason that we did that is because I think it's everybody, but I'm going to say from personal experience, because it is personal, my milk supply really depletes through the day. And I think that's the same for everyone. But we found that mine was really decreasing, and the girls both want to feed a lot at night in the lead up to bed. And that's because you haven't got as much milk. So we found that if we gave them a big bottle of expressed milk that I express at the beginning of the day, because obviously I have the milk supply then, that they are fuller for longer and not having to constantly feed. So they're just more well rested and more content. And I think that's a massive one for us. And also it's peace of mind as well, knowing that, you know, Rhea does 150 to 160 ml every evening between 5:30 and 6:30. It depends how bedtime's gone with the first one. But she does it every night consistently. And I know, peace of mind, she's not hungry. So whether she's fussing or she's in pain or, you know, she's crying because she's got wind, I know she's not crying because she's hungry, because she's had all of that milk. Like it's not possible for her to drink anymore. If she did have any more than that, she'd probably vomit because she's just can't hold it all. So that is something that I think really helps with them sleeping through. It's obvious if they had a bottle and they're full, they should be able to sleep for longer because they don't need to wake for milk, because they shouldn't be hungry. So that's what works for us. That's something that we do, and something that I think plays a really big part in Rhea sleeping through. The next bit of advice I've got for you is having a solid sleep routine. And this can be like the smallest things ever. Rhea doesn't really have one. Juno had, like, because she wasn't sleeping great, she had like the best bedtime routine ever. And she still does, to be fair. She's a very lucky girl. She has a really lovely, like, relaxing bath every night. She gets books read to her. She gets all sorts of really lovely things. And she loves it. And we love doing it as well. Rhea, second baby syndrome, is her bedtime routine isn't as wonderful as that. But we do have a few key things that we do every night. That is the bedtime bottle. We always swaddle her in her Love to Dream swaddle, and she really likes it. We had these for Juno as well, and I absolutely love them. It just stops them from startling themselves awake because they're kind of nice and cozy and they feel like they're being cuddled. So we use White Noise, the Love to Dream swaddle zip up things, and she has her bedtime bottle, and that is her bedtime routine. As she gets older, we will obviously read books and we'll probably combine their bedtime routines. That feels like miles away, but that is something we will do in the future, so they will kind of inherit the same bedtime routine. But yeah, if you can, if it's your first and you've got the time to, get a nice soak in the bath in there every couple of days. Just little rituals that you want to do, maybe a baby massage, or I don't know, anything. Read books, room spray, just things that you think maybe are going to help your baby sleep, or things that you like to do with your baby. Just make a little kind of bedtime routine. It can be a little ritual. I think they're also then kind of thinking, oh, you know, I've had my bath, it's bedtime soon, or I've just had my bottle and been swaddled, it must be bedtime soon. It's just kind of like, you know, teaching them to group all of those things together, and then one day it'll be like, ding, I'm going to bed. I hope. And another little bit of advice for the sleep routine is, if you can, get them to sleep in their crib for naps in the day. Not always possible, definitely rarely possible with your second, because you're just running around constantly, or you're out the house with your first. But when possible, when you're in the house, have them sleep in their crib. Just gets them even more used to it, even more comfortable with being in there on their own, and it will only benefit you in the future. And the last bit of advice that I have, which isn't for everyone, but definitely for me and both of my girls, is winding. Both of our girls have both been really windy. If they are left with burps or farts that haven't passed, they will tell you, which is also really great, because if Rhea has fed and she's trying to sleep and she wakes up screaming, I know it's that she's got a burp. So I pick her up, wind her again, and it usually comes up. And this also is a really good way to kind of keep them awake once they're fed, and then put them down awake, because you're feeding them, they get really dozy on the boob or on the bottle, and then you pick them up and wind them. That will obviously kind of keep them a bit more stimulated and awake. So we've done it with both of our girls because they are windy, and even now Rhea still wakes up at about 4 or 5 a.m. with wind, which is interesting because it's always bottom wind and not burps. So it's like we're missing some bits, and it's kind of grouping together, and it must be quite painful when she's trying to pass it, because she always wakes. She doesn't kind of wake screaming with that wind, but it's uncomfortable for her, and she's kind of wriggling around trying to pass it. So we're not even like anywhere near smashing that part of it, but it is definitely something that I would recommend. Wind your babies really well so that you know that they're not waking with wind. It's another reason that they would wake, and if they haven't got wind, they're going to sleep longer. That's kind of everything that we've done. We might also just be really lucky that we've got a baby that likes to sleep. I know some people that are just hands up will say, my baby doesn't like sleep and I've tried everything and it's just not working. And that is some people, that is some babies. They just don't need a lot of sleep, or they don't really want to sleep. They just want constant comfort, and that is fine. If you want to continue to do that, you do you, whatever works for you. But we got to a point with our first where we were like, this isn't working for us. We cannot function on this anymore. And we started reading books and looking up different bits of information and just seeing what we could do. If you're going to take any piece of advice away from this video, I would say the most important one is that you should always try and put them down awake. I know it's not possible all the time. It's not going to be possible all the time. I can't do it all the time. Quite often Rhea has to fall asleep on us if we're at playgroup or Juno's having dinner or something like that. We just can't be in two places at once. So it's not always possible, but when you can, if you have the time to, just try and get them used to going down awake, being on their own awake, laying down, like just, yeah, little bits like that, because then you haven't got any habits to break. We found that Juno would only go to, well, we literally just couldn't put her down unless she was already asleep. Then the only way that she would fall asleep was if she was on the boob or on the bottle. And we had those, that was the hardest thing to break with her. It took ages. And Rhea's not like that already, and she's only 8 weeks old, because we've tried hard not to form that habit. Yeah. I also want to add at this point that I am not at all a sleep expert. I am just a parent that is trying to survive, and these are the things that have worked for me, for us, for our family, and I wanted to share them with you because she's only actually, at the point of filming this, she is only 7 weeks old. So she is sleeping through and she's 7 weeks old, and it might change, but it might not. And if it does change, we will still stick to these things. We will still try and follow the steps that I've just given you guys and the advice that I've just given you guys. And yeah, if it does change, I'll do another video and you can all laugh at me. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can implement some of these tips and tricks, and your little one will give you a restful night ASAP. If you need to hop into the comments and ask any questions, then please do, or pop over to my Instagram and slide into my DMs. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week for my weekly upload. Lots of love. Bye.